It wasn't exactly a super exciting, interesting year for the coaching carousel in college football. Outside of Texas A&M, there weren't a lot of high profile, really super desirable, intriguing. I wonder who's going to take that jobs that came open. Now, there are some interesting hires. There were some interesting names picked up. There were some moves that were unexpected. But for the most part, it wasn't the overwhelming Power 5 blue blood programs looking for a new guy cycle that has somewhat become the norm, because if you can't see success in the first, 3 years at a Power 5 program, the questions start to be asked of whether or not you're the right guy for the job. And yet in 2023, there just weren't that many jobs that came open that made people go, wow, I wonder who's going to take that job. That's going to shift the landscape of college football. It just didn't really happen. And whether that's a good thing or not can be discussed. I think it is, because I think there are some guys and some programs that deserve a little bit more time to get things going. For instance, I didn't think that Billy Napier was going, at certain points throughout the season at Florida, was going to get through the season, let alone get to the 2024 season as still their head coach, because that's a fan base that has not been shy about turning on guys pretty quickly. And at times when Florida is out-talented by programs in the SEC East that it shouldn't be, those questions are going to exist. And I think that's natural, but at the same time, you have to allow that to sort of go through its course and let Billy Napier to get a full recruiting cycle in. Let him get in the transfer portal. Let him get in junior college. I think there are some benefits to letting some guys work some things out. For instance, West Virginia and Neil Brown. I think West Virginia wanted every reason to hire Neil Brown and keep Neil Brown going forward, but they needed to have a pretty good year this year. They went 8-4. He keeps his job. I think everybody's probably better for it. That's a nice job. It's a nice coaching job that Neil Brown did. Your patience is rewarded. I think that's a good thing for everybody involved. But when you look at the hires that were made, I think there are 5 really, really, really good hires that, and obviously we'll come back and look at this down the line at some point and be like, man, I can't believe you thought that was a really good hire. But we're going 5 through 1. These are my 5, I think, top coaching hires of the college football coaching carousel. At number 5, I put Houston. Willie Fritz comes from Tulane to Houston. Willie Fritz has won everywhere he's been. And one of the things that stinks about being a Power 5 athletic director and being a Power 5 football program is most programs, administrations are afraid to make an unconventional hire or go out on a limb. And somebody should have went out on a limb for Willie Fritz a long time ago, but didn't. Tulane was the one that did. He rewarded them with a couple of 10-win seasons. Spot in a New Year's Six bowl game last year was really close to that same thing this year. And if it doesn't break 10 minutes before his conference championship game that he's leaving, maybe things are different in 2023 and they're back in the Fiesta Bowl. Nonetheless, Willie Fritz has done a fantastic job at pretty much every program he's led. If you can win at a lot of different places, conventional wisdom says you're going to win wherever you go. Now, is Willie Fritz going to turn Houston into a national title contender? I would doubt that very much. But is he going to turn them into a 9 to 10 win team program every year? I would say pretty close, yeah. I would say that Houston's floor is a 7-win team every year. Houston's ceiling is a 10 or 11 win team in a revamped Big 12. It's a nice job to have in a talent-rich area with backers and boosters. Don't be surprised if Houston doesn't become a perennial contender for the Big 12 title under Willie Fritz. At number 4, I have Jonathan Smith going to Michigan State. Oregon State is objectively a difficult job. There's not a big recruiting base. You are second fiddle, little brother in your own state. You are the fourth best job in your region, let alone in your conference, in your division. Then throw in the fact that you're losing Power 5 status. Oregon State's a tough, difficult job. And he won in a tough, difficult job. The one question I have is Jonathan Smith is an Oregon State alum, is a native of that area. How does that translate to Michigan State? Because it appears as if there is sort of a track record of, if you come from outside that recruiting footprint as the head coach, the first job is like you hire your offensive and defensive coordinators, obviously. Like these are the guys that you want, and your strength coach. These are like the imperative hires. But then you hire, basically start asking around, like, who's the best high school football coach in this state? And how can I sign them up to be my running backs coach / wide receiver coach, whatever position you want to throw in. Basically, it's like DBs, wide receivers, running backs, special teams, and make them my coach and get in the front door of a lot of high school football programs in that state. I don't know that Jonathan Smith has done that. And that's the only kind of reservation I have of, have you thought about that as you go into a scenario where you don't have a ton of history, brand recognition, etc., in the recruiting base in that area? That's the one question that I have. But I think it's a good hire, because if you can win at Oregon State, conceivably, you can turn Michigan State back into a contender. I've said this before on the podcast. Cincinnati and Kentucky got really good over the course of the last 6 years, while Michigan State trended downward because Cincinnati and Kentucky came into Ohio and started gobbling up the second-tier recruits. Not the 5 stars and the high 4 stars, but the low 4s, high 3s that permeate the state of Ohio, and to a lesser extent, Louisville and Indianapolis and Cincinnati, and cleaned up. If Michigan State can go back to that, they can get those 3 stars and develop them into really good players, and the 4 stars into really good players from the state of Ohio, from Indianapolis. Things will get back on track at Michigan State, but that's easier said than done. My number 3 is Sean Lewis, who got hired at San Diego State. Sean Lewis was the head coach at Kent State, left to become the offensive coordinator at Colorado, and is now leaving the offensive coordinator job at Colorado to be the head coach at San Diego State. Much like Oregon State, Kent State might be the most difficult might be the most difficult FBS job in America. There are no resources. The facilities are bad. You are in a not great area. The recruiting base is pretty good, but the recruiting budget stinks. The academics of the school are not great. And you're right down the road from another job that's really difficult in Akron, in a rivalry that doesn't move the needle in the area in which you live, work, play, and coach. There's a lot of apathy. There's a lot of who gives a damn. There's a lot of, should we even have a football program? Should we be FBS? Should we be Division I? And there's push from some folks inside the State House to combine Kent State and Akron into one university. So that's a difficult job. That is a difficult spot to be in. And Sean Lewis did a really nice job at Kent State, turned them into a winner. And he went to Colorado to be Deion Sanders' offensive coordinator. And when he was the one calling the plays, things were going really well for them. They scored a lot of points. And then for some reason, Deion Sanders said, I don't want this guy calling my plays anymore. And then they sucked the rest of the season. And San Diego State is, I hate the phrase sleeping giant, because sleeping giant, like there's a reason that every giant that is referred to as a sleeping giant has been sleeping. But San Diego State is a better job than people think it is. There's a nice recruiting base. the academics are getting better while still able to get recruits into the university. Facilities are nice, brand new stadium, and is advantageous of it's in the Mountain West, so you're somewhat compact. Plus, you're getting to go to Hawaii whenever you want. I mean, not whenever you want, but the travel destinations are nice as well. San Diego State's a pretty good job, and I think Sean Lewis is a pretty good coach. I wouldn't be surprised if this time, 2025, so give me 2 years from now, that Sean Lewis isn't the head coach at a major program, not just a Power 5 program, but a big time, top tier Power 5 school. Don't be surprised if. And if that happens, I will remember December 13th, 2023 and tell you, I told you so. But I'm just telling you, be on the lookout for Sean Lewis in the coaching ranks, climbing that ladder. Number 2 is a super interesting hire to me. Super interesting hire to me, because this guy has spent a lot of time, similarly to Willie Fritz, climbing the coaching ladder. And the one question that I have is, all of your experience is in the extreme Northeast, but I have Bob Chesney, the head coach that got hired at James Madison. He is coming to James Madison from Holy Cross. His career coaching record, whether it's Division III, FCS Division II, is 111-46. So he's won 70% of his games. The one question I have is, you're a D3 coach in New England, a D2 coach in New England, an FCS coach in New England, and now you're going to James Madison, which is in rural Virginia. So whether, you were just a really great coach in New England and you knew the key players, whatever, or whether you can translate that to James Madison, remains to be seen. But again, in my theory of, if you can win 70% of your games, no matter where you've been, that to me says you're going to find a way to be really, really, really successful somehow, some way. You're going to do that. You are going to be successful. And whether that's just super simplifying it or not, I don't know. I imagine that there's probably part of that like you are completely oversimplifying the idea that winning is easy. And I don't think that winning is easy. I think that there are just guys who are naturally inclined to say, I am going to find a way to win. And when you've done it 70% of the times, he's an experienced head coach, been a head coach since 2010. So he's 46 years old. So he's got some gusto behind him. There are some acumen there that, like, this guy is going to be a good head coach. And I find him to be a really intriguing guy. So I think Bob Chesney is number 2 on the list. And number 1, to me, the best hire that was made this year, I don't even think is close. Because this job sucks. It's terrible. It's bad. And for this school to pull out that name was impressive. And it's New Mexico. New Mexico hiring Bronco Mendenhall. Bronco Mendenhall is impressive. Bronco Mendenhall has 16 years of head coaching experience. He's 135-81. And he stepped away from Virginia for a couple of years after just basically saying, like, hey, I'm burnt out. I'm not enjoying this anymore. I don't like it. So I'm leaving. But Bronco Mendenhall had a losing record at his first 2 years at Virginia. Once they were 2-10, and then he went 6-7, 8-5, 9-5, 5-5 in 2020, 6-6 in 2021, and said, you know what, I'm out of here. But Bronco Mendenhall won 10 or more games 5 times at BYU. He won 9 games or more 6 times. Bronco Mendenhall in his career has 2 losing seasons as a head coach. And he had been a assistant coach at New Mexico. When he left New Mexico, he went to BYU to be the defensive coordinator before he became the head coach. And Bronco Mendenhall is still he's not a young guy by any stretch of the imagination, but he is a younger guy. He's 57 years old. So if Bronco Mendenhall still has 10 years of coaching in front of him as a head coach, if he wants, and whether or not that it happens at New Mexico or not, I don't know. Whether this is hey, I'm ready to start the climb back up the college football coaching ladder or not, I don't know. But I know that the guy can coach. I know that he's won 2 conference championships and played in another conference championship game as a head coach at one school that BYU is still a pretty good power. Virginia is not, and I don't think will be a college football power for a while. And he won there. So I put a lot of stock in that you've won a lot of games as a head coach at 2 completely different programs. And New Mexico's job stinks. There is no recruiting base. You have to recruit Texas and California, neither one of which are all that close to Albuquerque. The commitment from the university is not really there. The fan base is, I'm not going to say it's non-existent because that's not fair to New Mexico fans, but it's not nearly the size of BYU or Virginia or darn near anywhere else he has been and coached at. So the challenge is there, and maybe that's what entices Bronco Mendenhall to get back at the game, is like, this is a challenge, and we need you. And some folks just need to be needed. My wife is one of them. Luckily, I'm married to a woman who needs me to be worthless because she needs to be needed. And Bronco Mendenhall needs to be needed, I imagine. And it works and helps that a school like New Mexico is like, hey, we need you. Please come out of retirement for us. And he went, all right, yeah, that's fine. Cool. Sounds good. That's a big time hire for New Mexico. The Mountain West is one of those fun conferences where it's not like in the SEC, that Alabama, Georgia, LSU, and a lot of years Florida are going to be really good top tier programs. In the Big Ten, that Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin are going to be formidable opponents and likely champions. The likely champion of the conference comes from that group. In the ACC, Clemson, Florida State, you can go on. The Mountain West doesn't necessarily have that. Like, you expect Boise State to be good every year, and that obviously doesn't always pan out. That's why they hired a new coach this year. But the Mountain West sometimes is up for grabs. It's a super cyclical league. Now, I'm not saying that New Mexico is going to become a dominant player in that league, but Bronco Mendenhall can take them from being the laughingstock of the league, being of the league, to formidable and interesting and deserving of respect. And I think that's probably a pretty good spot to be in for New Mexico. Again, whether Bronco Mendenhall stays at New Mexico for the next 10 years or whether he stays there for 3 years and some Power 5 school goes like, you see what Bronco Mendenhall's doing at New Mexico? Remains to be seen. But for New Mexico to pull Bronco Mendenhall out of retirement is an impressive pull for them. They should be super excited. It should go a long way in raising money, raising NIL, getting people excited about that program. So kudos to them, and I'm interested to see what happens. But to me, that's far and away the best coaching job, the best coaching hire made during this 2023 cycle. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Tomorrow, we're going to chat about bowl destinations. Like, where would you want to go and where wouldn't you want to go? Because there are some good ones. There are some really good bowl games, some really good bowl destinations that players are like, hell yeah. And then there are some bowl destinations like, I couldn't find that place on a map. And I don't know that it sounds like I want to be there. And we'll chat about them. And I've got I got an interesting take on this, I think. I'll let you decide tomorrow here on the Daily Huddle. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out here at Saturday Glory. If you are listening on a podcast, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. We'll see you tomorrow right here on the Daily Huddle with Saturday Glory.